just say, first of all, I want to congratulate the Irish American Heritage Center here on what they've been able to do in refurbishment and the dedication that they've shown to not just this event but also to other events, and renewing the Irish culture, which is so important. I think you realize that your roots are strong and deep, and the more you do that, then your foundation is going to be solid as you do things into the future. So I first want to congratulate them. And I want to congratulate Cynthia Beliveau. I mean, she's just a great lady. I've known her almost my whole life. She and her family lived 2 streets over from where I lived in Bangor, Maine, and it's nice that the Irish north of Portland get recognized at this event. It's a big deal. And, as I was saying, her family was 2 streets over. We kind of grew up together. I went to St. John's School. And she and her family did. I went with her sister Winnie, my father and her father and mother were very involved in politics. She's a great lady. Her father and mother got very involved in the Kennedy campaign, as my father and mother did, and working together. But the mothers were the real motivators in both families. It's not that the husbands were shrinking violets, it's just that the mothers, were the ones that were setting out the directions, and you better get on the right course or you're going to be on no course at all. But Cynthia's just been a great lady. I know probably her biggest accomplishment, she's been on numerous boards and commissions, but her biggest accomplishment, I think one that she really values, is her 4 children. Those boys are some of the nicest young men. They're all accomplished in their own right. And I know she's very proud in each and every one of them. And it's certainly something that she and Severin can be very, very proud about. Just thank her for her contributions and for what she and her family have done for not only themselves and for the Irish, but also for all of us here in the state of Maine and throughout the country. She's had a tremendous impact.
Cynthia, we're so excited. This is a huge night for you. Obviously, you're a leading Irish American in a great tradition with Jerry Connolly. I think only the 3rd to get this award is just unbelievable. We're just glad to be here. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of Irish people, a lot of Irish names. But seriously, we're very glad to be here. And we're just so excited for you. And I can't wait to hear the speech. And it better be good.
And you look beautiful.
And you look spectacular. Particularly the makeup.
Yeah, well, I've known Cynthia for quite some time, and she's definitely a sweetheart. She's very energetic. She's a caring individual. She's done a lot of work for a lot of people here in the state of Maine, and she continues to work. And I've never seen anyone with such enthusiasm and commitment to her causes here in Maine. I'm just glad to know her over a number of years. And she's definitely a saint, having been married to Severin for decades. She's definitely a saint. So congratulations and best of luck.
Oh, Cynthia, congratulations. It couldn't happen to a better person. So pleased for all you've done for St. Joe's College. Great night. Congratulations.
I've known Cynthia since she was a little girl. I know the Murray family from Bangor, and this is a great night. She deserves it, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Well, I told this story on the way down. You know that Cynthia was in a convent one time. And years ago, when I was with a group of people and she was out dancing, one of my friends said, she never learned moves like those in a convent.
Cynthia has been a dear friend, a great friend of the family. She's done so much for the church, and I congratulate her on this wonderful award. Great.
Well, I've known Cynthia for over 40 years. Not only her, but her father, her mother, most of her brothers. We've been fairly close throughout the years. She has just certainly been an outstanding person with all the endeavors that she has been successful at. And I'm very pleased to stand here tonight to congratulate Cynthia and to have her receive this award, which is so well deserved.
Hi, Cynthia. It's been great being reconnected with you through our sponsored work. I think it's great this evening is for you. Enjoy it and enjoy the Claddagh. God bless.
Well, as somebody who's known Cynthia for 32 years, it's well-deserved. She's a terrific person, and quite frankly, I'm thrilled to be here for her.
And I've known Cynthia an equal period of time. Severin's a good friend of mine, as is Cynthia. She's very worthy of this, and we're delighted to be here.
I've known her for 23 years, and she's absolutely one of the most splendid people I could ever have the pleasure of knowing in my life. I love her. She's great.
Can't top that. Cut.
Do you have a Cynthia story?
Well, I love Cynthia very much. She's a delightful cousin, and I spent a lot of good times with her and great memories. But I want to keep most of them to myself.
She's very open, she's very energetic, she's very kind, and she's humble. There's not, for a person who's in a prominent political family, what her husband's accomplished, what she's accomplished, what her children have accomplished, someone like that, they could let it go to her head, but she's as humble as the day is long. In fact, when we came in, I said, boy, are you going to have to do a jig? She said, I wish that would be easier than speaking.
Oh, I've known Cynthia a good number of years, and she really has been an outstanding public citizen, involved in education, involved in so many things. She's done a great job with her family. The kids are just absolutely outstanding. Really a great credit to anything she's been involved in. Serving on the University of Maine Board of Trustees, St. Joseph's College Trustees. She's really been a star, and it's so deserving.
Well, she's my older sister to start with, so obviously offered lots of direction in my life. Most of the time pretty good. Very loyal, lots of fun. Very happy for her tonight. It's a nice occasion that people are recognizing her for all her leadership. Okay?
Well, she's my constituent. I'm Sharon Treat, a state representative, and Cynthia is a huge part of our community of Hallowell. She's just been there out front on all kinds of things, whether co-chairing the United Way or being a volunteer for all kinds of Democratic candidates like myself. She even drove me door to door this year, which was, thank goodness. So she's just a really big part of the community, and it's great to see her honored for so many years of great work.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. First of all, I'm honored that Cynthia asked me to speak on her behalf tonight. She's a great friend, a wonderful woman, and I think, judging by the crowd that's already assembled here, a whole lot of people would agree. So it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. I'm excited. Thank you.
So if you could just take a quick minute and welcome our governor, who has served our state honorably and is leaving our state in one of the best conditions of any state in the country, John Baldacci.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to apologize to all of you, but I'm not able to be here for this evening because there was another event that got scheduled, and I apologize very much for that. But this is a sweet event, and it's with a lot of friends, relatives, and it's special. This is like being home. And let me say, it's just also refreshing to recognize that we're going to be honoring Cynthia Murray tonight, and in honor of Irish north of Portland. So congratulations to you, Cynthia. The Murrays and the Baldaccis have enjoyed a close and lengthy relationship, having lived in the same Bangor neighborhood. My family was raised on Palm Street, while the Murrays lived 2 streets away on Mount Hope and Maple Street. The Italian and Irish communities arrived in Bangor at essentially the same time and overcame some of the same challenges confronting both communities. For Severin's benefit, the French Canadians were also part of our community. St. John's School and St. John's Church served as a meeting place for the Irish and Italian community, and I attended St. John's with Winnie, Cynthia's sister. While both of our fathers were deeply involved in municipal and state politics, our families were guided by strength, leadership, and commitment of our mothers, who, I must concede, were the moving force in both families. Cynthia and I both graduated from the University of Maine at Orono, which we both continue to have a strong and supportive relationship. To assure economic stability in the family, I appointed Buddy Murray as Commissioner of Business and Regulation, a district court judge a Superior Court judge, and if I was around any longer, you would have been on the state Supreme Court. And I just appointed Cynthia to the Maine Arts Commission to assure a Murray Beliveau presence following my term in office. Cynthia's many accomplishments have been described in detail and will be this evening, such as the State Personnel Board, the University of Maine Board of Trustees, but her real success and enjoyment is that she has had in raising her 4 boys, who are 4 of the sweetest young men on the face of the earth. Congratulations to you on having such a great family, Cynthia. The Beliveau boys, Emmett, Devin, Connor, Liam, are Cynthia's true pride and joy, in addition to her many public service commitments, and she devotes a great deal of time and energy to supporting and visiting her 3 granddaughters, Maeve, Agnes, and Sierra, in Kittery in Washington, D.C. Congratulations to you, Cynthia. You deserve this honor, and you deserve it for a lot more, but thank you for letting me be a part of your evening. Congratulations.
The longest ovation I've ever had. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks and praise. We thank you especially for this opportunity to share the joy of this evening. Please deepen our awareness and our appreciation of our Irish heritage. Help us to know the hard work, the values, the faith, the determination, and the pride which mark the lives of Irish American individuals and generations that we celebrate this evening. Thank you for Cynthia Murray Beliveau and her many gifts and the love she generously shares with so many people. Thank you for helping her to know her gifts as a mother and a grandmother, a wife, a sister, an aunt, a leader, and a friend. And thank you for the many creative ways that she has found to share those gifts for your will and our common good. God, please send your blessings upon all of us, upon our time together this evening, upon our rich Irish heritage, upon Cynthia and her husband, Severin McCarthy Beliveau, upon the food we drink and we share, and finally upon our brothers and sisters who struggle this day. We make this prayer in your name. Amen.
Love a party. It's the gathering of the clans to share friendship, to share stories, and oh, what stories. It's wonderful. Welcome all to this 3rd annual Claddagh celebration. I would like to first start by recognizing the other 2 Claddagh Award recipients, our Governor, the Honorable Joseph E. Brennan, and these from Munjoy Hill in Portland, Maine, and the 2nd annual Claddagh Award winner, a gentleman from the West End of Portland, and a citizen of the state of Maine, Gerard P. Conley, Sr. The Claddagh is a beloved symbol of all the Irish: friendship, loyalty, and love. And every year the board chooses a recipient. And we are the Maine Irish Heritage Center. We're not the St. Dominic's Irish Heritage Center or the Portland Irish Heritage Center. We are very honored this year to present this award, and so pleased that she agreed to accept it, Cynthia Murray Beliveau. We give this award to a person who has made Maine a better place to live and who makes us proud of our Irish roots. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia, through her volunteerism, her leadership, and her advocacy, has made Maine a better place to live for thousands, hundred thousands of Mainers, many whom will never know her name. But we here tonight are here to celebrate her. Thank you, Cynthia. Before we begin the program, I would want to take a minute to thank each of you for coming and for supporting the Maine Irish Heritage Center. This year, through your generosity, we will have heat in the library, which means our 1,000 volumes of books and tapes and CDs will be accessible to people all winter long. And we're going to have a lift to the second floor, so we'll be open to all. So thank you. And thank you to the hundreds of volunteers that keep this place going and who are the heart and soul of this place. Where most of us were raised Catholic here, and we always know there was usually a second collection. And you will find on your table an envelope. So if you could dig into your wallets and your hearts one more time, and on the way out there's a place where you could leave your donation. So we thank you for that. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Duddy from Senator Collins' office. And Jennifer, would you please come forward and bring greetings from the Senator? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Duddy, and I'm pleased to be here this evening on behalf of Senator Collins. I'm also, on a personal note, glad to be here with the Murray family. My husband grew up with Buddy Murray, and Frank baptized both my children and confirmed me. And it's really nice to see you all again, and so many friends as well. Senator Collins asks me to attend many events. I know this is one that she particularly wanted to be here for. I do have a letter for you, Cynthia, and I'm just going to say that the Senator, sends her warmest congratulations to you, who are so deserving of this award. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I have a letter which I'm going to hand you in just a moment, but congratulations from Senator Collins.
Congressman Mike Michaud. Now, the Irish and the French have a long history in the state of Maine. And I always thought that my friend Mike Michaud might have a little bit of Irish in him from somewhere. Thank you for your support of the Maine Irish Heritage Center, and welcome, Congressman. Thank you for all you do for us.
Thank you very much, Mary, and tonight it'll be Michaud. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and as I was looking at the program, I see the whole list of hosts that are on the program for this evening, and I'd be remiss if I would not make a comment about this list, and I'm sure that Severin has definitely talked to a lot of folks here, and he's got a lot of billable hours in for this evening, so the law firm will be doing very well from this evening's event. So Cynthia, I'm sure he appreciates that very much. But it is a great pleasure to be here this evening. And Cynthia, I want to say that you have definitely given so much over the years and are continuing to give to the people here in the state of Maine. I really appreciate everything that you have done. As you look at the work, and I've actually talked to a lot of folks here, a lot of stuff I've known about Cynthia for quite some time. There's a lot of different things I learned this evening. But one thing that goes out through all of this, Cynthia, you definitely are an individual who is very passionate, someone who really cares about what's going around you, not only here in the state of Maine, but all around the world. The fact that you've taken trips in third world countries is amazing. Your heart is as big as gold, and you definitely are not afraid to speak your mind out as well in those particular areas. She's actually been to Washington, D.C., lobbying me on the health care bill and how important the health care bill was for us here in the country, but a lot of other areas. And what's amazing is that for those of you who do know Cynthia, is she's also, throughout her life, has been a teacher. She's taught a lot of individuals. She's still trying to teach Severin certain things. I think she married Severin actually to have a special project, with Severin. But Cynthia, I do want to say that you truly have been a friend to me personally. You've been a mentor, whether it's talking about politics or different issues. But more importantly, you're an individual that cares about your family. Your family has always been first, whether it's your 4 sons or Severin, you really care about family. And all the work that you have done and are doing, family has always come first. And that's what I really admire about you. And the fact that no matter where I see you, whether it's at a fundraiser at your house, whether it's in Washington, D.C., or a special event, you always have that smile on your face. And you always have kind words to say. So I want to congratulate you very much on this award. You definitely are deserving of the award, and God bless you for everything that you have done. You are truly a saint. So thank you very much, and congratulations, Cynthia.
Next, I would like to introduce the new Senate Democratic leader, Senator Barry Hobbins of Saco.
Thank you very much. It's my role, Cynthia, to bring the greetings from the State House, whatever's left of it, that is. We're all here to honor you, Cynthia. First, I'd like to recognize our 2 previous recipients, former President of the Maine Senate, Gerard P. Conley, Sr., and the Honorable Joseph E. Brennan, Governor of the State of Maine. Thank you very much for coming. Congressman Michoud, congratulations. You dodged a big bullet like some of us didn't. So, and thank you very much for all the service you provide us. It is interesting to kind of reminisce about politics. And I was 20 years old when I first met Cynthia in 1972. At the Democratic State Convention. I know I'm looking around, I see a few heads nodding here that they were there. I was a young junior in college running for the legislature, and someone who helped recruit me was then Representative Frank Murray, now Father Frank Murray. And so we were at the, this is my first, I went to one other convention in 1970 when I was a younger lad. And so we were at this hotel in Waterville, and it was a hospitality room for former Senator and former Justice Elmer Violet, who was the candidate then running as a Democrat for Congress against Bill Cohen. And so I went there with Frank. We just have Father Frank. I don't know how to call him. I call him Frank. And I was a little nervous and everything, and all of a sudden I look over, and who is this woman there who was really charming, and I said, geez, of course, I said, gee, who's that, And I was young, And he said, that's my sister, Cynthia. Oh, that really made a really great impression, I think. And she said, she's dating Severin Beliveau. So, and quite frankly, at that time, I didn't know who Severin Beliveau was except for the former chair of the party, so I reserved judgment about that whole situation. But, that when you reminisce about politics and the wonderful memories, the Murray family and the Beliveau family really come into focus if anyone has been involved like I have been in politics. And I have to tell you that Cynthia, your family and my family are very close. Father Frank and Frank served in the legislature with me my first term. I took his place as the youngest member of the legislature, and he was mad at me a little bit because I became the youngest member in the history of the Maine legislature at the time, so he was a little mad at me. But the good news is that relationship has really fostered. He shared with me the fact he was going to take a vocation, and Father Frank and Cynthia knows married Donna and I, and he also baptized all our children and has been a family mentor for us. And so, Cynthia, your father and mom were wonderful people. You have a wonderful family, your children. And Severin, you're a lucky man. Now, before I get the hook, I'm going to like to read for you a joint sentiment that was provided to me after legislative action by the legislature. And it says as follows: be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, join in recognizing Cynthia Murray Beliveau of Hollowell, who is the recipient of the 3rd Annual Claddagh Award from the Maine Irish Heritage Center for her long-term commitment in advocacy on behalf of Maine people, especially women and children. The Claddagh Award is given to honor a distinguished Maine Irish American who is devoted to the community service in the state of Maine. Ms. Beliveau has many contributions to her community, which include serving as chair of the United Way of Kennebec County, as a counselor at large on the Hollowell City Council, and as a member of the Board of Trustees of St. Joseph's College, which awarded her the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters. She was one of the founders of the Maine Women's Lobby and has volunteered her several years to international projects working to improve education, housing, health care, and clean water. We extend our congratulations to Ms. Beliveau on her receiving this well-deserved honor and send her our appreciation for her dedication to helping Maine people everywhere. And be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 124th Legislature and the people of Maine. And this is a joint resolve that was signed by Elizabeth Mitchell, President of the Senate, Joy O'Brien, Secretary of the Senate, Hannah Pingree, who is the Speaker of the House, and Millicent M. McFarland, Clerk of the House. And you'll be happy to know, Cynthia, that your state senator and state representative, along with other legislators, signed this in honor of you, and we congratulate you for all of your dedicated public service. Thank you very much.
Victoria is a longtime friend of Cynthia's, and she will begin the more formal part of our program.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mary.
Victoria.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here amongst so many friends and familiar faces and some not so familiar, and meeting new friends as well. The Claddagh Award, as you've heard tonight, recognizes a person of Irish heritage who has demonstrated excellence in giving back to the community. And tonight, as we honor Cynthia, I think it's totally appropriate that she becomes the first woman to receive this award. As women, we are particularly thrilled to honor Cynthia. There are as many men tonight here with us as there are women. And for the women here in the room, we are really trying to restrain ourselves. We're in mixed company, we understand. We're going to try not to tell bawdy jokes. There is alcohol being served, and so we're going to try not to break down into our general bawdy selves. We're going to behave ourselves. So let's take some time, though, to understand tonight not only what the Claddagh Award is about, but mostly about what it is to be an Irish woman or a Celtic woman. Cynthia is not unlike her strong Celtic female ancestors who until 1366 enjoyed full and equal rights under Brand's law to that of a man. Celtic women had property ownership rights. They could divorce and remarry at will, Cynthia. Now I tell you, I know. They could take a husband of her own choosing, and women could hold prominent roles in politics, and they could even sit as judges. So you see, Cynthia comes to this prominent role in Maine and throughout the country in so many different fields of interest very, very naturally through the generations. Her leadership, her fierce fidelity, and devotion to friendships symbolized by the Claddagh is just one of the many truths in Cynthia's lives. When 250 friends and family have gathered in your honor, it's either for your wake or for an election. Definitely, we've had enough of both recently, and so I'm particularly glad that neither one of those shoes fits you tonight, Cynthia. So why did we all come tonight? We know Mary Mack wanted a new furnace for this marvelous center, whereas Yeats said, "For the good are always merry, and the merry love to dance," which would certainly describe Cynthia. Mary and the center will have a new furnace after tonight. The selection of Cynthia to receive this award as the first female recipient has also been especially meaningful. Irish women, as I said, Celtic women, have a sense of community, a spiritual connection from the heavens to right here on earth, with the core of their grounding, their center, always in family. One of Cynthia's truths is the devotion she has to her own family and the family that she and Severin have created together in their partnership of nearly 40 years. She has loved and cared for both her own birth children as well as the many young people who have come and gone through their family and lived with them as family from as far away as Africa and also from China. Her heart and conscience are what drive her to always open her door and her arms, to always put another plate on the table, to make everyone feel welcome. Cynthia's commitment to her own family is driven by her passion for justice, and it gives voice to her work for women, children, and those with absolutely no voice. Just this past legislative session, if it hadn't been for Cynthia, no one would have testified on behalf of a new category called the non-cats, or the non-categorized, those who are disabled and those who have no voice, as the new health care legislation rules were being drawn up And of course, those always particularly affect women and children. Her tireless advocacy moves through many areas of her work. Not many newly elected Hallowell city councilors would present a resolution, as Cynthia did in 2003, before the bombing of Iraq, supporting a full pursuit of other options first, before military intervention. In response to criticism from fellow councilors who were military veterans, Cynthia responded, well, we can at least comment on public policy, on foreign policy from our little town of Hallowell, even though we don't create the policy. Well, Cynthia not only prevailed 5-2, the governor agreed, signed on, as did the legislature, and the very first resolution from Maine was sent to the president, then President Bush. Cynthia makes a difference. She shows up and she speaks out. Cynthia can be serious. She's a serious woman, as all of you know, and you will hear more about her achievements and awards during the evening. But she can be funny too, very, very funny, and perhaps that's why we're here too. Her joy for life is infectious and touches everyone around her. She is wicked smart, as they say here in Maine. I'm just a blow-in, you know, from Texas. But she sends the funniest emails around to her friends and family, which makes you laugh so hard you cry. She tells jokes that makes you laugh even harder. And for certain women of a certain age, you know what happens then too when you laugh too hard. Cynthia can be the heartiest and the most natural of us all, but she loves to dress up too. Did I tell you about the time that she came to our home once for a fundraiser, and in she comes with Severin. They're just back from Paris. And what does Cynthia have? I went, wow, Cynthia. Cynthia has green hair. And not only that, the green hair matched her green coat. And that wasn't enough green glasses. It was terrific. Cynthia said, well, what did you expect? I was in Paris. But in the very same time, she can be absolutely glorious, because she likes to dress up too, at the inaugural balls as she dances the night away. She dressed up again at her son's weddings. So there was Cynthia, dressed up, looking beautiful as always, whooping it up to the great music and the great stories that her sons were telling and the great time that everyone was having. But this time, Cynthia took her shoes off, whooping, dancing, laughing, smiling, having the absolute time of her life with her wonderful new daughters-in-law. Her laugh is just as infectious as her whole personality is. She is a riot as she glories in the adventures of her children and her grandchildren, new discoveries, or just plain funny things that happen daily. She can as easily tromp around in the snow for a long hike, return, cook dinner for 8, 10, 12 people, it depends on how many Severin decided to invite over, and be ready to go on whatever adventure might be next. She is natural, kind, thoughtful, and genuine. If you meet her in Beijing, China, or rather in China, Maine, she is the same wonderful person. Oscar Wilde said once, some cause happiness wherever they go, whenever they go. Others, wherever they go, and that's Cynthia. I could talk about my friend Cynthia for hours, but the challenge is to sort of keep this short, I was told. How lucky are we to know this Celtic woman who has fulfilled many of her dreams in a life filled with love and adventure, always learning, reaching out to others, rounding up her family and keeping them close by, always at her husband's side as steadfast as when they first met. We recognize and celebrate Cynthia as a tireless advocate, a voice of justice, and force in this world for good. Cynthia, we love you, we celebrate you, and we're so glad that you have received this award because you deserve it more than any woman I know. Congratulations on a life well lived. Thank you.
just always remember there being a lot of people in the house, a lot of other kids, a lot of neighbor kids. I was the oldest of 5 children, so I think I grew up pretty fast. But I was kind of a tomboyish kid. I was sort of the one that people came after to go outside and play. I loved to sing and dance, and that was a lot of fun. Grew up doing that. My parents and my grandparents' family, the Catholic Church, and their respective families of Irish and French heritage were very important to them, so that's how I grew up, knowing some bits of culture from both of those sides. I idolized my dad. I think he was working all the time, so didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time with him. My dad was named for the great Irish patriot, Robert Emmet Murray. We often wondered what his name would have been had he been born on March 3rd or March 5th, because he was born on Robert Emmet's Day on March 4th, so of course that's why he has that name. And my mom was Laura Leona Gite, then Murray. I graduated from high school in 1965, so I was kind of a 60s kid. There were always 1 or 2 kids from the class that went on to study for the priesthood or religious life. My mother's oldest sister was a Sister Mercy, so that seemed like a logical progression to me. That's just something I felt like I wanted to do at the time. So I went off to become a Sister Mercy and spent 3 years there. Went through the postulancy and 2 years in the novitiate. Back in those days, you really had to take your first vows at the end of 3 years, and you took them with the intention that you were going to take them forever. And I think at that time I began thinking, well, am I really ready to say that I will never have a family of my own? After that, I went on to the university for a couple of years and did some teaching after that, and went back to the university to get my master's. I would have loved to have been a conductor. I think I could more easily speak the language of music than anything. I can understand that. There are some things that I would have loved to do that didn't happen, or that haven't happened, and probably aren't going to happen. But there are other things like jumping off the pier at Little Diamond behind the ferry boat and getting swished back and losing my bathing suit. But things like that I feel like I've been courageous enough to try and have managed. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff too that's just fine.
Thank you, Mary. I was not nervous about speaking tonight until I started talking a minute ago to my brother, and he leaned over to me and said, "Good luck to you. They wouldn't quiet down for Grace." Dr. Murray Beliveau, it's a pleasure. Cynthia insists that I call her that ever since last spring when she was awarded the Doctor of Humane Letters. It's kind of gone to her head a little bit. I was asked to touch upon Cynthia the early years, and I was a little puzzled because we are a typical Irish family in that Cynthia is the oldest and I am the youngest, and there's almost a generation between us. She's so much older than I am. But after thinking about it for a moment, it became clear to me that I was more than capable of doing this, because as you started to see and you got just a touch of the flavor of, Cynthia was the firstborn, which means that Cynthia's entire life has been chronicled in photographs. Cynthia was not only the firstborn of our immediate family, she was the firstborn of our generation, of all of my father's and mother's siblings, which means, of course, she was the darling not only of Mom and Dad, but every aunt and uncle that we have, and all of them took photographs, so that we have Cynthia at every other day chronicled. So I was able to go back to the Cynthia Murray photo library and piece together enough history that I can feel confident in speaking to you tonight about Cynthia, the early years. So that led me to, first of all, think a little bit about this issue of birth order. And I did research. I went online and checked Parent Magazine, and there really is something to this birth order stuff. Parent Magazine actually did a piece not too long ago, and it was able to focus on some of the issues that are not only the characteristics of firstborn, but it's quoted as saying, firstborn children desire control, and they will typically become a compliant nurturer or a more aggressive mover and shaker. So that's Cynthia. That fits. And then you go down through the list of actual characteristics of the oldest child: natural leader, high achiever, organized, responsible. That's Cynthia. And then I thought to myself, but the list also goes on to add the other ones, which is really the flip side of all of those things. They're know-it-alls and bossy. And then the last characteristic on the list was so striking that I started to think that maybe Cynthia was not the firstborn after all, because one of the characteristics of the oldest child is on time. I said, wait a minute here. Went back to the research. Some of the things that have been part of my formative years in development, and really, quite frankly, some of the most meaningful events that happened to me early on, were directly linked to so many of the things and so many of Cynthia's early life choices. You heard earlier that Cynthia, after high school, decided to join the Sisters of Mercy here in Portland for a brief time, and our family didn't go on vacations. Our event was we got packed into the station wagon and we drove to Portland to visit Cynthia, because there was no coming north for Cynthia at that point in time. So literally, our family times and our family trips involved driving to Portland to visit Cynthia once a month or once every 6 weeks. And then another event that was early on in Cynthia's development, and obviously my development, something that I had almost forgotten about. Shortly after Cynthia's graduation, Cynthia worked for an insurance company, Kemper Insurance Company, in Boston. So were you a claims adjuster or something? Believe that? So Cynthia worked for an insurance company in Boston. That meant that my first trip out of the state of Maine got to be to visit Cynthia at Kemper Insurance in Boston. So that also involved my first trip to Fenway Park and my first ride on an airplane when I got to come home alone. One of Cynthia's next steps was being a music teacher for the Old Town School Department. And as such, got an apartment in Milford, Maine, which is a small town not too far out of Bangor, which led me to be able to have my first overnight bicycle trip on my own to Cynthia's apartment, where I got to spend the night. I have such a broad expanse in my early development. And then it led to the point where, when I was of the ripe old age of 15, Cynthia was able to convince my dear parents that it would be a really good idea to allow their little baby boy, who was 15, to go off and spend the summer on his own working as a dishwasher in Agunquit, Maine, because Cynthia convinced them that she'd be there almost all the time visiting. In reality, I think Cynthia came once that summer, but it was enough to get me out the door. I raise these examples because they obviously were meaningful to me, but I think they present and demonstrate for all of us an example of what Cynthia is to all of us. She opens opportunities and she expands horizons. And she certainly has done that with me, and I think she does that with each and every one of us if you stop and think a little bit about it. I can't leave the podium without sharing a few remarks about Severin. I mentioned, and it's, as you've seen from the video, that Cynthia initially decided to join the Sisters of Mercy and spent a few years there, left before her final vows, but ironically, it was not until after she left the convent and after marrying Severin that her canonization became complete. We're all familiar with the term that we all have our crosses to bear. A slight variation of that is that Severin is the cross for all of us to bear. No one more than Cynthia can appreciate that. This is a true story. Last week, I'm starting a new job, and I was actually sitting in Kennebec County Superior Court. I was actually shadowing some of the program, and so I was sitting off to the side of the courtroom just kind of watching, and some fellow that I'd never met before, didn't know from Adam, came up and sat beside me, and he was a bit talkative, so we started chatting, and he wanted to know who I was, so I said, my name's Buddy Murray, and he said, he said, you related to Cynthia? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, we all know Severin. I said, all right, yes, we do. And he said, everybody that knows her calls her Saint Cynthia. I said, well, guy, I said, I'll tell you privately, Severin. I don't want you to take issue with it. But he linked the sainthood directly to her role with Severin. Let me conclude, if I could, with just a moment of some serious reflection. Cynthia is an amazing and inspirational human being. Whether she is serving in Africa or Haiti or Hollowell, whether it's for a brother that she's known for 50 plus years, or whether it's with a stranger that she encounters on the street, whether it's sharing a handkerchief in a moment of grief, or raising millions for a capital campaign, Cynthia Murray Beliveau is always there. And she brings with her her energy, her commitment, her passion, her faith, and because of that, she makes the world a little bit better place and a little easier for each and every one of us to endure and thrive. And on behalf of the Murray family, I'm honored to be here. I'm proud to call her our own, and I'm extremely grateful that she is my big sister. I love you, Cynthia.
My name is Doris Beliveau, and tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am the French connection in this Irish gathering. How many of you here are from Northern Maine? Just raise your hand. Anybody from Northern Maine? Yeah. All right. How many of you from Central Maine, Bangor area? And you thought the Northern was Bangor. No. Bangor is Central Maine. How many? All right. How about from Southern Maine? Lots of you, right? Anybody here from out of state? Now the real question is, how many of you in this room have felt the gracious generosity and kindness of Cynthia? And that's why we're here, my friend. I'm so honored when Cynthia introduces me as, this is my best friend. My friendship with her began in our early 20s as undergraduates at the University of Maine. Typical of college women in the 60s, we were searching for our path in life. I joined a sorority, Alpha Chi Omega, where I met a number of women from Bangor, Frances Sheehan, Cynthia Beliveau. Cynthia was most interesting because of a recent experience as a novitiate at St. Joseph's College. I was impressed by her act of exploring a call to a religious order. That time, that seemed big to me, and for her willingness to search for another path in a secular world. Cindy was a music major. She sang like an angel and aspired to be a composer, as you saw in the clip. She had long black hair, great Irish hazel eyes, and terrific dimples. Often people would ask if we were sisters. Yeah, I don't have the dimples, but long black hair. Yes, we were foxy looking in those days. It was in those days, too, that Cindy, who knew Bangor well, she took me to the greatest Bangor spots, where we danced and sang, and we danced and sang, and we danced and sang. We were innocent, untraveled Catholic girls. We were a pair in pursuit of ways to just change the world. Fast forward 5 years. Cindy is in Maine, and I'm in Massachusetts. Both of us work in education. She introduces me to a man who would become her husband, Mr. Severin Beliveau. Severin, that was a strange name. Severin. Well, as it turns out, he was more mature, more sophisticated, and worldly than we were at that time. As charming as he was, it was a bit of a challenge for me, my friends, to imagine that they would marry. But as you all know, the rest is history. And Cynthia and Severin will soon celebrate nearly 40 years together. It's amazing, 40 years. How did that go? How did that happen? Emmett was their first child. Oh, he was so cute. He had Cynthia's dimples and wavy black hair. Then came the gentle and loving Devin, priceless with a mohawk, followed by Connor. We called him C.O. He was a hunk of burning love. And Liam, my godchild, the yoga and meditation man. Cynthia would spend summers in Aquasic, and I would visit with my family. And I just recall those being the best of times. We would strategize about getting away in between the children's naps to work out, which in those days was not a trip to the gym, but a bike ride down the Bemis Road. Every bike ride was different. Sometime it was off-road through the woods, and it left us feeling a little bit like Thelma and Louise. Other times we discovered places like the Stevens Phillips Memorial Preserve, which is a sanctuary for wilderness camping, and in 1980 it had no electricity. Campus checked in at a log cabin where the caretaker was a middle-aged lady. I recall arriving there, hot, sweaty, thirsty, and so wanting to take a swim, but I didn't have appropriate attire. Our hostess encouraged us to skinny dip at the Sunset Beach site, and she would be on guard for us. So, off we enjoyed the warm waters of Moose Lake Meguntic. Ah, c'était quelle aventure, quelle aventure. On a number of occasions, the Belivos, the Bonos, and another couple, comprising of 4 boys and 3 girls, would take canoe rides on the Kennebago with frequent stops on sandbars, where the children would entertain us with their plays, their skits, that were largely produced and directed by Emmett, or Devin, with costume designed by Nicole and the Eretzian sisters. Memorable characters included Inspector P.U., P.U., Inspector P.U., and Dr. Connor. It was about this time that Severin brought home a new family member who was later named Proctor. Cindy cried. She didn't want a dog. No, and especially not a male dog. No, she cried. He could have bought a female dog. He bought a male dog. As her family grew up, Cindy would often talk about wanting to get a PhD in music or theology or a job. And I would say, Cynthia, you're raising 4 boys, holding court as Severin's wife, was one of the most influential men in Maine, and opening your home to Amadou from the Senegal, Fifi from the Senegal, and others from the area. My friend, I'd say to her, you have a full-time job. You're raising statesmen. The boys had opportunity to realize their potential, as well as develop a sense of responsibility for service to others. Her dedication to them was inspirational. She spent nights in hospitals, cared for broken legs, as well as broken hearts. Some of the boys went to Russia, others to India, Thailand. They learned Arabic, Spanish, French. They served in food kitchens and visited their grandmother and did community service. Today, they're men of character, men committed to public service, men of integrity and spiritual. They are truly, in my estimation, Cynthia's greatest achievement. During this very busy time of her life, Cindy maintained her sense of spirit and good cheer. She was the first person I thought of when I had the opportunity to go to South Africa for 15 days as a member of a delegation of 12 American educators. I remember calling her and leaving her a message on her answering machine. Cynthia, I said, I've been invited to go to Africa. I can bring a guest. Come with me. Call me back. 3 months later, we were off to South Africa on a trip that was life-changing. A few days, the first few days were ones of great adjustments, and Cynthia would call Severin several times to ask if she should come home. Could he handle the home front without her? Sure, he'd say. In South Africa, we visited Soweto when guides were required and where the year before tourists had not been permitted. Our hotel in Johannesburg had high security. Europeans and Americans had been kidnapped. So we were advised not to leave the grounds. However, we felt caged and unable to interact with anyone. So we escaped and ran to the pizza shop, some 100 yards from the hotel. We were welcomed by the patron, and after telling our stories and having pizza, we were escorted back to the hotel so that we would be safe. On that trip, we witnessed poverty unlike anything we had ever seen before. We felt the invisibility of the indigenous people in places like Stellenbosch. This year, Cynthia traveled again to Africa and took it to another level, to volunteer in schools and to serve the poor communities. So, in concluding, some key words to describe Cynthia's journey, from sacred to secular to a sensational first-class human being. And for you, Cynthia, I send you this Irish blessing. May the sun always shine on your window pane. May a rainbow be certain to follow each rain. May God fill your heart with gladness to cheer you. I love you, Cynthia.
I like the third world approach to things. It's a great leveling. It puts things in perspective, being inclusive, being open to the needs of others. I was really lucky in this most recent experience. This time to Zambia and work for 3 weeks in way out in the bush with a whole bunch of kids on a team, and the strength of the group really was the team, which was wonderful because everyone had different strengths and gifts and talents, and all together we managed to be able to help in a whole lot of different ways. I did some work on raising some money to connect tap systems for water into an already dug borehole. It was in a way coming back to one of my original loves, which was teaching. Throughout my life I've always been a teacher of sorts. I taught music in the public schools. I was a guidance counselor for a while and did counseling for little kids. I grew up during the time when I think women were coming of age, and I think we believed back then, and I'm talking in the 70s, that you sort of had to keep the resume current and you had to always be able to do everything at all times, and I don't believe that anymore. I've worked as a volunteer in a lot of organizations, a lot of political stuff, a lot of state stuff at the state level, tried to influence the lives of other children and other women by founding them. I was one of the founders of the Maine Women's Lobby. I think I always dreamed that maybe someday I really would get my PhD, and I began to work on that, but I really don't think I'm going to go there. Dissertation seems pretty big at this point and pretty unnecessary. And I was very greatly honored this year when I did receive an honorary doctorate, so that was pretty good. That was more than pretty good. That was pretty neat. That was really nice. So, I mean, that's something that I wish I had done earlier. I really wish I had been able to run a marathon. That's something I always wanted to do. I used to run quite a bit, but never quite enough. I thought, you know, when I get to be 40, I could really train. And when I got to be 40, Liam was born. So that was the end of that marathon, and my knees were pretty bad after that. So I never did run a marathon.
Good evening. I'm Janet Mills, the Attorney General, or some say Attorney General du jour. We'll see. Cynthia Murray Beliveau and I have been good friends for, more than 30 years, mainly because we have so much in common. I mean, we're both beautiful, we're both intelligent, well-dressed, well-traveled, well-to-do, okay, maybe only one of us is. We are almost exactly the same age, and we're both Mainers through and through. We're both feminists. We're both married older men. We're both determined we're never going gray. But I have 5 stepdaughters, and she has 4 sons. Very self-sufficient sons who know how to clean, do laundry, cook, and take care of their own stuff, right, Connor? She is Catholic, of course. I'm WASP. She is tasteful in all things and always appropriately dressed. Me, well, I'm comfortable in blue jeans, and I dress in the dark every morning, and I hope everything matches when I step out in the sun. Cynthia served on the distinguished John F. Kennedy Center Advisory Commission on the Arts. I once took down the sets at the Sandy River Playhouse in Temple, Maine. Cynthia wrote a letter a few years ago to Pope Benedict protesting the war in Iraq. Well, I banned Fentiman's Victorian Lemonade in Holton, Maine, went on the Colbert Show to talk about it. She works for charities. I work for the government. But with 5 daughters and 5 weddings, it might as well be working for charity. You know, but both of us coming from Maine, we both like the great outdoors. We enjoy nature and camping and roughing it in the Maine wilderness. We were brought up to appreciate the Maine woods, camping under the stars in a rough lean-to and using an outhouse 50 feet back in the woods, picking berries and fishing for food and cooking over a small wood fire with rough utensils. Even now, Cynthia enjoys roughing it in Rangeley. And I do so enjoy visiting her little bungalow on the lake. I use the little lean-to next to the 3-car garage beside the tennis court and the swimming pool. But you know, I'm getting old, and I just can't take country living the way I used to. Recently, when I visited the Beliveau bungalow, it was just too much of a hardship. When I got in that hot tub, it was actually below 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And the granite on the countertops in the kitchen chilled my fingers, so I had to cook my steak and jumbo shrimp on the $5,000 grill in the back patio. It was awful. The sun was so bright and the furnace so warm, I had to drink my martini at room temperature. And when I sought respite and peace of mind in the 50-foot meditation yoga room upstairs, I was driven absolutely crazy by the sound of all those leaves falling off the birch trees outside the window. It was too much. You know, I didn't meet Cynthia actually until after she had met and married Severin. Maybe she'll explain to you later on tonight how she met this man and why she married so far beneath her station. Some of you may know that Severin Beliveau was president of the state Democratic Party chairs in Washington, D.C. in the early 70s, and it was actually his telephone that was wiretapped by the Watergate burglars. What you perhaps didn't know was that this happened at the very time that Severin was courting young Cynthia Murray of Bangor, Maine. Well, I thought it my duty as your Attorney General, and in my capacity as Maine's Chief Law Enforcement Officer, I subpoenaed the actual tapes from the Watergate wiretaps of 1972. And tonight, I just want to share with you confidentially, not to leave this room, and for the first time ever, a single excerpt of those highly confidential documents, the contents of which have never previously been exposed to the public. Now, you know Gordon Liddy and his gang, they were amateurs. Their wiretap techniques were very bungled, so they actually only got one side of the conversation. But this is part of what the Watergate burglars caught on tape from Severin's Washington office. The conversation went something like this. Hey, Sin, it's me, Severin Beliveau. You remember me? The guy from Rumford. Yeah, at the Elmer Violet party. Yeah, receding hair. Yeah, that's me. Old guy. Yeah, me. Yeah. Loud voice. Talk a lot. Yeah, that one. That's me. I'm down here in this big round building. No, not the silo I wanted to take you to in Hamden last weekend. It's in Georgetown. No, Cynthia, it's not in Saginaw County. It's down the street from Clyde's, you know, where Teddy and Big Ed hang out at night. No, that's not a big horse, Cynthia. It's a bar. No, I've never been to Bangor Raceway. You have, huh? Uh-huh. Clyde's, it's like a big city version of Sonny Miller's. Anyway, I'm at this place called the Watergate. It's an office building. It's really cool. I can see the Potomac River from here. No, not the Penobscot. Cynthia, the Potomac. It's this big muddy river that runs through the capital. No, not Augusta. The nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I'm in a place called Foggy Bottom. No, that's not an island in Penobscot Bay. Hey, say, Cynthia, what do you say you and I get serious? What do you mean, a girl in every town? Who said that about me? Priscilla in Portland? Never heard of her. Brenda from Brewer? Wendy from Westbrook? I don't know them, I swear. Frida from Fort Kent? How do you spell that? I swear I don't know any of them. You say you want me to meet your parents? Murray, huh? Ooh, Irish. Did I tell you I'm Irish? Yeah, of course I'm Irish. Why, that Beliveau thing, that's just my father's name. I'm really a McCarthy, through and through, I swear. That's no blarney. Why, I'm almost as Irish as Eddie Kelleher. Mon Dieu, je te jure, je suis sûr, sans blague, je suis Irish, et tout le monde le savait. Ooh. At that point, the tape cuts out. And for the sake of all that blarney, Gordon Liddy and all those guys did federal time. It was a few years after that episode that I met Cynthia. It was 1977. The price of a postage stamp was 13 cents. Jimmy Carter was president. He pardoned all the draft evaders and told us to turn down our thermostats to 65 degrees. Cynthia, don't call me Cindy, and I were both elected to represent the state of Maine in a delegation of 19 women to the National Women's Conference in November that year. The election was at Husson College. The conference was in Houston, Texas, two towns that were worlds apart. On the plane to Houston, she showed me this picture of this one-year-old kid of hers with dark hair and deep eyes. Emmett. Emmett, I said. Sounds like the name of someone's valet. Cute kid, I thought. I hope he's toilet trained. From the airport in Houston, we were bussed like a bunch of cattle downtown to the hotel. And the bus took us past this long, treeless strip with billboards and rowdy bars and tattoo parlors and way too many strip joints. And I think we both felt like watching this urban landscape. We just wanted to get out of the bus, go right back on the plane, and head right back to Maine. It was a frustrating challenge to keep a feminist facade in that strange city. But those 19 delegates, we worked on a 26-point plan to further the cause of womanhood in the United States of America. It was people like Lillian O'Brien, Lois Reckitt, Merle Nelson, then young Renee Talbot, Linda Smith Dyer, Cynthia, and myself. Recently, I came across my papers from that national conference. They were wedged in between an old edition of Jane Fonda's workout book and a tattered edition of The Joy of Cooking, both obviously gifts. I remember listening with Cynthia to Barbara Jordan's speech, which I'd listened to intently, when she exhorted us to change the way things were, saying, "Not making a difference is a cost we cannot afford." That's pretty good, huh? I remember Bella Abzug presiding over the group of 2,000 delegates and wearing some crazy hat, and Gloria Steinem with her long hippie hair and sleek, stylish demeanor, and Betty Friedan and all those great leaders. And we listened to Rosalind Carter and Lady Bird Johnson and Betty Ford. We returned to Maine with all this vim and vigor, and we wanted to put through this 26-point plan to better the cause of womanhood. But we were disappointed. The bills we put in failed. The bills we put in died on the appropriations table. Little did we know, we weren't capable of getting stuff through on our own. So it was Cynthia and 4 others of us escapees from Houston who started the Maine Women's Lobby in 1978. It was the first of its kind in the nation, and now I believe it's the longest surviving women's lobbying group in the whole country. We got this... We got this little group going. We charged $2 a head for dues, and we got Helen ready to come to Maine and put on a fundraiser. We wrote her this beautiful letter. We made up a letterhead and everything, said we were this prestigious group. Would she please, while she's here giving a concert, have a little fundraiser for us, and she did that. And I found recently the first board members, the list of board members, and it's handwritten. There's like only first names on it. You know, as if there was only one Pat in the whole state of Maine, Pat Ryan, one Cynthia, one Lois, one Linda. And then it came to a time when we needed to get some publicity. So we schemed. We thought, what can we do to create a little attention? We found out that President Carter was coming to Bangor. So we got together in the basement of somebody's house, and we typed up a press release and photocopied it. And we got it out to the press, a one-page thing with a 10-point plan. We, Maine women, insist on the following rights and responsibilities. We insist that the President of the United States sign and push forward the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. So we issued that, and it got some press that this new group of women were out there making demands on the President of the United States. And we said, we got to get it to him. How can we get this to the President of the United States? So be true to our word. Well, we learned that the President was staying at Cynthia's parents' house on Maple Street in Bangor. And there was this intense security around the Murray house, of course. And we couldn't just barge in and give it to him. So the only person with security clearance was Cynthia. She agreed, and as far as we know, because she's a woman of her word, she did in fact slip a piece of paper under the President's coffee cup at breakfast the next morning at her parents' house with a list of 10 demands from all of Maine's women. We didn't get a response, of course, from the President. We didn't need to because we'd found our voice, by hook or by crook, and we become known. The press could spell our name. We'd arrived. You know, I said that Cynthia has deep Maine roots, and I believe she has the toughness and tenacity of our rugged hills and the patience of rustic farmers, the dependability of ocean tides. She's Maine through and through. Like a true Irish person, her compassion, her joy in her family, work, and charity, her generosity of spirit are world-renowned. I have brought you greetings also from Robert Gordon of the United Way of Kennebec County, which I'll give to you without reading. I also brought you greetings from a fellow who phoned me on the way down here, a guy named John Day. And he just wanted to say, Cynthia, after 37 years, he's sorry. Cynthia, I've enjoyed hanging out with you in Rangeley and Aquasic and in Wayne, Maine, and on Gandeston Drive and on Pond Road in Manchester and at the great house on Litchfield Road in Hallowell, and are you using your home as a family sanctuary and as a staging ground for so many good works in the community at large. I treasure memories of fishing with you at Steep Bank Pool on the Kennebago, boating on Rangeley Lake and making chowder from scratch at the last moment, reading, sharing, entertaining, and scheming, watching you spread goodwill and good works from Port-au-Prince to South Africa to Jerusalem to Honduras to Zambia, and I'm so proud to call you my friend. I love you too, Cynthia.
Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love and hold her tight. So happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. Me and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me. So
I think a lot of times the way people end up together has to do with timing. I think there are probably many people in everybody's lives that we could love and be with at different times, and I just think it was the right time for me and Severin to be together. So that was only 37 years ago, so who knows, you know? A couple times people had tried to get us to meet each other, and it just didn't happen. And then finally, through a political experience, it did happen. And I was pretty surprised that that was the Severin, that was the guy that people were trying to get me to meet. I think at the time I was really into my sort of high feminism stuff, and I think Severin liked that. Severin and I have 4 boys. They all have good Irish names: Emmett and Devon and Connor and Liam. They're kind of spread out over 11 years. They are all amazingly wonderful individuals, totally different from each other, and that's what keeps life very exciting for me. Sadness in our lives when our son Amadou died last spring, when he had been living with us. He was from Senegal, and that was really tough. But we've had lots of other kids pass through our lives over the years. My life really has revolved around family. For me, that's real important. Occasionally a day goes by when I realize, without meaning to, that I've spoken to each of my siblings over something before the day is over, or each of my children. For me, that's been very sustaining, and it's helped me to be able to offer other gifts to others because of the strength of what I can come back to and what I can gather from. Both her dad and I not only love them a great deal, but want to be part of their lives all the time. And we realize maybe that's too much, but we want to have them know that we want to be present at whatever's important for them, for us to be at. We want our grandchildren, we're happy to be left alone with our grandchildren in Rangeley or wherever. We just want to experience them in as many ways as we can. Now life has been very, very good. No question about it. A very lucky lady.
Good evening. My name is Megan Higgins, and I am one of two women here tonight who are happy to call Cynthia our aunt, and we also both call ourselves Meg, so we are presenting tonight as her two Megs. And I'm going to keep things brief tonight before I pass things off to the other Meg, but I can't speak to most of Aunt Cynthia's lifetime that we've heard about tonight because she wasn't graced with my presence until 1986. But I can speak to the woman that I've had the pleasure of knowing for the past 24 years, and I'm honored to do that now. Many of us know, and most of us have witnessed, the power of Aunt Cynthia's presence. In like kind with other women of influence, Aunt Cynthia can easily own the rooms that she walks through. She is always generous, she is rarely uncertain, and she is never unkind. Her contributions to my life, though, were much simpler. Aunt Cynthia has added quiet influence to my life in ways that even she might be unaware of. I have never sat with her in a boardroom talking budgets or bureaucracy, but I've sat with her over a glass of wine talking social policy and men. I haven't joined her on most of her worldly adventures, but I've played cards with her overlooking a quiet bay in Ireland on a Tuesday. I haven't watched her marshal her undeniable skills as a political coalition builder, but I've watched her wrangle and raise my 4 cousins and Uncle Severin with seemingly endless reserves of patience and energy. Her resume is undeniably impressive, but I think as we've seen tonight, and as we all know from personal experience, the memoir would be much better. Please give me a call if you need an editor. Aunt Cynthia, I love you.
I feel delighted and blessed to be here this evening to celebrate Cynthia, my aunt. She has been such a role model to me as a mom, as a leader, as a spiritual seeker. She's given me gifts that I really needed during certain parts of my life. And without her, I don't know if I would be here today in a way that I feel proud and grounded as a woman from Celtic tradition. And I think about Cynthia, and I think about the way she lives her life and the sense of she dives in deep and finds this inner strength to meet the world, to greet the world in the mundane of changing Ciara's diaper, or delighting, like you saw in this video, delighting in a child's presence, to the celebrated, where she raises $2.5 million to erect a student center and health and well-being center for the students of St. Joseph's College, to the places of profound meaning, where last year our family lost our dear Jane. And our side of the family, Darby's side, when we deal with stress, when we have adversity, we go into our cave. We read a book. We get kind of bristly and don't come near me. And Cynthia, to my brother Rich, who did that a little bit, would say, hey, I'm driving back from Rangeley. I'm driving by. Can I stop and bring dinner and read Riley a story? Now, the trip isn't just by, it's 45 minutes out of the way. She would call. When the phone wouldn't answer, she'd call again. Severin and Cynthia traveled there day in, day out, keeping that love alive. She's given me that courage, and I want to share kind of a nitty-gritty sort of experience of what she's taught me. Was that 5 years ago, I was going through a challenging time in my life. My husband and I, Paul, and my daughter, Devin, 5.5, traveled to Ukraine to adopt our youngest daughter, Svieta, and spent a month there. Incredible joy, scared, exhaustion. And it was January. We had been back a few months, and it was dreary out, and it was snowing, and I was just feeling overwhelmed. Can I do this? And I called Cynthia. And her voice just said, "Hello, Meg. How are you? What's happening? Tell me your story, and I'll share you with my story." And my heart got a little softer. The stress melted away. And I felt important. She said, "You are important, Meg." And the funny thing is, you may all say, "Oh, I could do that. I could do that." But you heard about her trip to South Africa with Doris. Well, Cynthia didn't let me know until our conversation was coming to the end that in 45 minutes, someone was picking her up to head to the airport to South Africa. And she hadn't quite packed and was just making sure she had her visa and passport. And I was there, and I was important. And that's the gift that she gives me, she gives my daughters, she gives our family. And it's this gesture that I kind of felt, is that she holds us here and she reaches out to the world and says there's enough. There's enough for here and now to look you in the eye like she did each and every one of us this evening and said, "Hello, how are you?" And I thank you for that gift. And I thank you for the love you share. And I thank you for my daughters who love you to death also. So bless you, and I love you, Cynthia.
Half the room, so I'm sorry about that. The light's right in my eyes. But I'm very humbled and very honored to be receiving this award from all of you tonight. It's hard to be full of humility with this much attention. It's kind of hard to stand here and say you're being humbled. But for the honor of all good, strong Irish women, I certainly accept these ideas of eternal love and friendship and loyalty on behalf of all of us, especially on behalf of so many good women like my mom who do a lot of the work for the good Irish men that they loved. Tonight we're celebrating these themes of family and friendship and relationships, and so I'm trying to manage how I do all of that. And Victoria said to me the other day, "Well, you said you wanted to be a conductor, and you kind of are a conductor because you're managing to do all of these different things with your life." And so I'm pretending I'm really a conductor tonight answering that. But I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here. Excuse me. So to this Irish Catholic community, I want to paint a little picture of where I came from. I was still writing this in the car on the way, so I'm sorry. There's a few papers here. But I want to read to you the names of the people that lived on our street, on Maple Street. Thought about this the other day. Their names were McNeil, the Currans, the Dailies, the Flanagans, the Sheehan's, the Moonies,
the McGinnises, 2 families of Hoolahans, the O'Connors, the Hugheses, the Agnews, the Morses, the McCloskeys, my cousins, the Kearneys and the Collinses visited a lot, the Flynns, the Largies, and oh yeah, the Murrays, who lived on the corner of Maple and Mount Hope Avenue. So the hospitality of that neighborhood and the ethnicity of that neighborhood was pretty amazing. Everyone always knew everything that you were doing that wasn't always a good thing, because there were a lot of reports that were given that we weren't necessarily aware of growing up. The Baldaccis, they lived like 2 streets over. That Italian community was totally different. John thinks it's the same, but it wasn't. I'm going to skip some of this because you've heard this ad nauseum. So those are the names of the people who lived on our street. My dad's name, as you all know, was Robert Emmett. And every year on March 4th, we were all treated to listening to him recite Robert Emmett's speech from the dock. And then Buddy kind of picked it up a little bit because he was a junior. And now I email it to Emmett every year so he can remember all of that. And each of our first 3 boys have one of his names. So there's a Robert, there's Emmett Severin, and then there's Devin Murray, and then there's Connor Robert. So all the first 3 each have moved on to the next generation with his names. But my mom was not an Irish lady. She just acted like one. She was half French. But Dad always told us that that was not her fault and we shouldn't hold it against her. So I'm really only half Irish and a quarter French. But that doesn't mean that I can only drink half as much as everybody else. That's not the case either. And then I'm married to a Frenchman, or so he would have you think. But you all know what his mother's name is now, Margaret McCarthy. I think most of you probably knew that before, a full-blooded Irish woman. So his name, get this, is really Severin Matthew Benoit was his confirmation name, so that we give a nod to the French for that. McCarthy Murray Beliveau. So you do the math. My boys are way more Irish than they are anything else, and their names just say that don't forget their true heritage. Their first names remind us all of that. I was actually holding out for Eamon on Liam, but Severin won because of his Uncle Bill. Of course, I always knew that Severin really was Irish, because after all, he was 35 when I met him. He was single. He lived at home with his mother and father. And his mother ironed his underwear. True story. That has not happened since, I want you to know. Now, as we all know, behind every successful woman, there is a man. So just in case there's anyone here who doesn't know Severin, I'd like you to stand up, Sev, just so everybody can see you. When one of his friends said that I absolutely had to speak about him tonight, his comment to me then, and he's sitting here in the audience, he knows who he is, he said he's hugely generous and hugely ridiculous, and we all love him for that. But how do you live with him for all these years? So ours, in a way, is a mixed marriage as well. My mom and dad were in a mixed marriage, French and Irish, so we have that same thing, only some of our differences have to do with generations. You've already been alerted to the great age disparity, to some philosophical differences. But really, the question is, how did I snag, Maine's most eligible bachelor? Some of you are old enough to remember the Maine Times picture on the front of the page that showed Senator Muskie, this guy in the middle, and Ken Curtis on the other side, and the quote was like, well, everyone knows the people on the outside, but who's the guy in the middle? It was Severin, of course. So this is how we met. There are a couple of pieces to this. Our families had known each other for some time. My Uncle Ned and Severin's father, Albert, served on the law court together at the same time. So our families kind of went back long before we met each other. His Uncle Bill and our dad had some connection that had to do with the Glenburn farm out in Kenduskeag, and all I remember about that was that we used to go out and cut our Christmas tree down there. Dad would drag me and Frank, Kathy, occasionally Winnie. We'd have to haul her out on the Christmas tree, drag her. He would take us way too far. Mom would call the police because none of us were home yet, and it was great drama around the tree. And lots of people had suggested that we ought to get together. After all, we were both over 25. We were single. We were living in Maine. But it was cause enough. I mean, there were really... However, Severin was chairman of the Democratic Party, and he had a gatekeeper named Ed Bonney who kept some women away from him. Not a lot, but somehow I never seemed to be on the inside track. So we really met through another thread that we have all grown up with, and that's politics, a thread in both of our lives. And that was, someone's alluded to it, Elmer Violet's campaign in 1972. Frank was chairing that campaign. It was down at Sonny Miller's, then became the Red Lion, but this was before Hollywood slots and kind of the big-time Bangor. So Frank was running it, and here's another change that's taken place. I was in grad school. Frank called me up on a Friday afternoon. He said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "Nothing." "What else?" And he said, "Would you put on a skirt and come down and sign the name tags for me?" I was like, the put on the skirt parts, the parts maybe changed. I said, "Okay, so I can do that." So I went down there, and I gave out name tags and collected money, and there were a few name tags left on the table when the program began, and so I was just merely trying to match them up with people that I could see that did not have names yet. And so I said to someone, "Well, who's that fellow over there?" And somebody went, "Who's that? That's Severin Beliveau." And he had come in with a young woman, and they were standing over there. The program was getting ready to start. And I was just shocked. I just kind of looked back and I said, "That is Severin Beliveau?" This is the guy I'd heard so much about for years. It just didn't seem that that would be possible. And then he proceeded to do the whole room and talk to everybody but the person that he had brought along for the evening. So I went over and just was making small talk because I didn't have any other role to do. And then she started asking me about my brother who was running this campaign. And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, aren't you with him?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm just the Bangor girl. Just one in every port kind of thing." So after the evening was over, we all went out and had a few beers. And before the next Saturday, Severin had called me. I think Frank had called Carol Lee, and things went on from there. So that was part of our political heritage. I mean, we all grew up with doing little political jobs from the time we were young. I think, we lived on St. John's side. That was the good side of town. And we had to put flyers on everybody's dashboard at the 7 a.m. Mass. Maybe we got off, didn't get to the 7, but the 8:15, the 9:30, and the 10:45, those were biggies, so we had to do the political thing there. And then our dad ran for city committee chair, and that was a really big contest. And he won, and he had run against a professor from the university, and so we all worked really hard, and we were pretty thrilled that he pulled this one off. And then when Frank and I were in college, we had to wait till he turned 21 to file his nomination papers when he ran for the legislature for the first time. So there were always tons of coffees and barbecues and political talk around the house. And once we did let the non-Irishman come in, who proceeded to talk with my mom about the Sears catalog, and then noticed on the wall the sampler that Mom had purchased from somewhere, and it was the Murray tree on the thing, and it was then that Jimmy Carter told us that Rosalind was a Murray, so after she was Irish, he was Irish after all. And then I have to skip some more stuff. However, I don't want to skip the fact that the Sisters of Mercy were a great influence in my life. My aunt was a Sister of Mercy, and then there were lots of pseudo-mothers that were very important to me. Sister Ruth Hayden, Sisters Dorothea and Madonna. That's my first grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, Sister Florette, Sister Jerome, who scared me to death, but I certainly learned a whole lot of English from her in high school. And Sister Mary Luke, who got me through Latin. I'm never sure how Sister Mary James could ever figure out that I learned Latin because I'd been sick, and Mary Luke helped me out and caught me up. And before that, I think Sister James thought I was really a loser in terms of Latin anyway. And all of a sudden, I knew what I was talking about, and that was thanks to Sister Mary Luke. So over the years, I had learned from all of this heritage that my social conscience, I guess, and my social responsibility ideals were formed by all of those Irish Catholic political, religious groups. And they sort of situated me, and I just began to pay attention to those ideas and ideals. And the things that I learned over the years from those places really, as you've heard, have a lot to do with paying attention to women and children, especially those that are very vulnerable or who don't have their own voices, to immigrants, to the environment, to community participation, to standing up against the war, both in the 60s and now as well, but standing up for nonviolence kinds of things and for peace activities. And I've done a lot of, I think those are very important pieces of who I am, relationships especially, equal pay for equal work and dignity of the human for the common good and health care and clean water and on and on and on. So I guess the one serious message I might leave with you is just how we figure out how we divide our 1,440 minutes a day that we have each day, how we make those choices to coming around to figuring out what it is we're going to do. There's so much to do and there are so many competing needs, and it's a mystery, but we have to figure it out. It is our responsibility, and in my heart, it's a commitment to justice, and so therefore we just have to take care of each other, so we just have to do it. So what I do is get up every day and show up. Sometimes I'm not so good at it, but I try. And I think if we find a passion or something that's important to you, you just have to go for it. You don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to work at it. And I often think back to the quote that Mother Teresa, that I read years ago when someone asked her about how did she not feel successful after she would serve people in the streets in India and they would die and she would just start on with the next person. And she said that we don't have to be successful, but only faithful to the work that we're doing. So I think that's true of some of the stuff that we did that Janet talked about in the early 70s and all. Some of the political stuff and the women's stuff, you just have to keep kind of pounding away at it. So even if all I do today is let somebody in line in the traffic in front of me or have a cup of tea with them or rock a baby or play in the leaves with a kid or mentor a coworker, I just try to be present to that person while I'm doing it and be present for that moment or live in that present moment. And whether you're causing a relationship to happen, whether it's for a few seconds or whether it's one, like some of the ones here from my friends that have spoken to you that I've cultivated for a lifetime. So I guess I would like to just close with a quote that I think is very powerful and moving, and it's from a Jesuit priest. His name was Pedro Arrupe, who was the head of the Jesuits, died about 20 years ago. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you will do with your evenings, how you will spend your weekends, what you read and who you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. I'm trying. Thank you.